So this is just a really quick overview of different types of university degrees. So a lot of people, when they leave high school and they go into university, they start with an undergraduate or bachelor's degree. You may have heard about this. That's usually 4 years, and that tends to be quite general. And then some people will decide to go back to school and do a graduate or master's degree. That's usually 2 years. Sometimes it's research focused, where you take on your own research project and do that basically all on your own. You create a thesis. And then after that, some people are crazy enough to want to go back to school for a PhD or a doctorate of philosophy. And this is not necessarily a hierarchy. I finished after I did my master's thesis, but this is just the focus, right? So when you get to doing a PhD, it's a really, really, really super specific topic that you become like almost a world expert in. And that can take people 5 to 7 years. So a long time. Hunter right now is working on her master's thesis. So she's going to be talking to you about some of that research. Okay, and before we get started, I would love to know where everyone is calling from. So if you know how to pull up the chat, can you let us know what province or what town you're calling from? We have done programs down in Miami, Florida in the past, and I think there were a few people who at least registered for this from down in Florida. So I'm interested to know if it's just our typical maritime participants, which we're so excited to have you. Leah Falmouth, Wolfville, wonderful. So happy to see you all. I know some of you have submitted your parents and guardians, or an adult that knows you well has submitted your nominations, and it's been great to see those come in. So we've got more in Nova Scotia. Lots of Nova Scotia here. That definitely makes sense. Wonderful. All righty. And I think I know some of your ages, so I think we're in the range of probably maybe 12 to 17 here. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass it over to Hunter. So Hunter, thanks so much for joining us. We can't wait to hear your talk, and you should be able to share your screen now.
Awesome. Let's share this one. Okay, so we can't really. Oh, I need this to move. Sorry, guys. 1 second. From start. Okay, perfect. Are you guys seeing my little bar as well, or is that not there?
That's not there. We just see your talk, your slides.
Okay, wonderful. That is great. So I am going to be talking today about my experience with studying sharks and my project on how mercury and other contaminants may impact our ocean's top predators. So, oh, next. There we go. Okay, so introducing me. I feel like if I could see everyone's faces here, I would recognize and see a lot of familiar faces. And you probably recognize me as well. My name is Hunter Hogan. I am a master's student at Acadia University now, but I have worked for Terranaut Club for 4 years now, which is crazy to kind of think about. But yeah, I began my master's in May of last year, and I'll be kind of done that in like this time next year, which is super cool. So the kind of format of this is that I'm going to go over some of my research and my experience, and then I'll kind of do like a little timeline for you guys and show you kind of like how I got to where I am today and kind of all the twists and turns of the road. Okay, so I'm going to throw some words at you right now, and then I'm going to go through and explain them afterwards. So my research is the project that I'm working on for my master's story aims to identify contaminant levels in elasmobranchs of two different regions, which is Nova Scotia and Miami. So we're going to get into kind of what an elasmobranch is in a little bit. But to do my project, we use non-lethal sampling. And kind of in this first photo here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but You can see one of the students on the boat that I work on in Miami. She's taking a muscle biopsy sample. So to do my research, we only need like a really, really minuscule amount of tissue, which is awesome because then it's like minimally invasive for the animals, which is exciting because we don't want to harm them kind of when we bring them on the boat. So yeah, we use this tiny little muscle biopsy to characterize bioaccumulation and excess mercury contamination in the sharks that we sample. And then we do this really cool thing that we can ultrasound the sharks and look for something that's called maternal offloading. So I'll kind of explain that in just a little bit. But my project has like a few different kind of facets to it. Okay, so let's start off here. What is an elasmobranch? An elasmobranch is a group of marine animals primarily, and they're cartilaginous. So when you think of a shark, a skate, or a ray, does anyone know, you can unmute yourself, does anyone know what a skate is? This is kind of usually people know what rays and sharks are. But yeah, skates are actually found just in the Bay of Fundy, and they're super, super awesome. Um, if anyone knows, you can just raise your hand or whatever else you'd like to do. But yeah, we skates are super cute. They're basically just rays, except they don't have the barb at the end of the tail. But they often do have kind of spines and stuff on them, so they are still pokey. Okay, so next. So we can get into some elasmobranch diversity, and I wanted to show you guys this graphic just to show you how many kind of different niches these animals fill. They range from like the size of a pencil to some of the largest fish in the ocean. They occupy every ocean kind of in the world and kind of every niche. So there's lots of ones that live in Arctic waters, warm waters, really, really deep water by like hydrothermal vents. And then lots of species that live in shallow coastal waters just off the coast of Nova Scotia, which is super cool. So I'll have you guys unmute yourself if you want and see if we can name some of these sharks. I feel like we could get quite a few of them if we're not too shy.
I'm going to start us off here with
Yeah.
a species that I studied that I figure no one's going to get. So we have a skate there in one of the middle photos. That's probably one of the species I studied, a little or winter skate. And I know we have shark enthusiasts in this group, so you can either answer in the chat or you can unmute yourself. But I know that there's so many of these species that people definitely know. I'll be surprised if anybody knows the top left-hand corner. That's a pretty cool one.
Yeah. Yeah, I will be too. That one is super interesting though. It kind of sharks are interesting. I mean, elasmobranchs are interesting because they come in so many different like forms. Like it's just so interesting to see the different kind of shapes and stuff that they can make with their bodies. It's really interesting and all the different patterns that they have. Yeah.
Elena, do you want to pop in here and pick one out since you're a fellow shark specialist and enthusiast?
Yeah, so many shark lovers in this talk. It's great. My favorite is probably the great white shark. Can anyone see where that is located on the screen? Kind of just underneath that funny creature that we were just mentioning with the weird frills. I love great white sharks, and fun fact, they are around our Nova Scotian waters here.
Yeah, my favorite shark is also on here. It's the one in the top middle. I didn't anticipate that anyone would guess that one. It kind of looks like a funny shaped hammerhead. And it basically is. It's the smallest member of like the hammerhead family, which is super cool. So they're not very big. They're less than usually a meter long, and they're called bonnet heads. And a really cool fact about these little sharks is that they eat seagrass, which is really interesting. So they are omnivorous, and it's something like 60 or 70% of their diet is made up of seagrass. So that's kind of really cool to see that they kind of changed from eating other fish to being little vegetarians, which is kind of fun.
So we got some answers in the chat. So Leah guessed the great white shark, the left middle,
Nice.
definitely. And I don't know what the participant's name is, but I assume their parent or guardian is Dave Mailman. Top right, whale shark. Yeah,
Nice.
they're coming in. Okay. Lily, sorry, Lily. Thank you. You got that right, the whale shark. Ayla, bottom right, Greenland shark.
Nice.
Yeah, Catherine, bottom left, basking shark. See, we knew you
We
had it.
know, yeah. Does anyone know what the one with the funky kind of, it has its mouth open. It's kind of on the far right.
So Hunter, we can see your mouse. So if you want to point to
Oh,
it,
you can. Okay. So this one here, does anyone know what this one might be? I feel like you guys have probably heard of it.
it has such a cool name too. I
It
always
does.
giggle at the name.
I'll give you guys a minute to think about it.
And I'll say that my favorite shark species is the middle bottom, which oh, here's another participant. Looks like a great hammerhead shark.
Yes.
Yes, those are my absolute favorite. When I saw them in person for the first time, I cried because they just look like absolute aliens of the ocean.
Yes. Yeah, they really do. I had a similar experience, Julia, and it was like so crazy to see. They look like they came from another planet. So, and their eyes are very expressive, so they kind of look at you like, what's going on? And it's fun to see them. They're really interesting. This one here with the funky teeth, this is a cookie cutter shark. So cookie cutters are really cool. I've never seen one, and I don't entirely want to see one either. They're really interesting. They only kind of have a bottom protruding jaw, and all of those teeth are kind of connected into one. So when they shed their teeth, they actually shed their whole row of teeth, which is interesting. And they live in really deep water, and they basically take chunks out of passing fish, and that's kind of how they survive, and they're less than a foot long, I think. So they're really interesting. To have such big teeth on such a tiny body is really interesting. Awesome. Do we have any more in the chat? Oh, oops, sorry, I skipped. Yeah, if we have any more kind of comments that we'd like to set on here. If not, I can kind of get into talking about what I do with these guys.
Someone asked if any of them are leopard sharks, and then after you touch on that, feel free to keep rolling.
Awesome. So I didn't put any leopard sharks in here, but this one here, if you guys can see my mouse, is a tiger shark. But I should have put a leopard shark in here. This one is it's a similar kind of style to a leopard shark, but it's called a chain shark, which is cool because you can kind of see like the chain links. I haven't seen one of these. They live in Australia, but I have gotten to see a tiger shark, and they're pretty cool. Okay, so I'll get into kind of what I do with these sharks now. We can talk about kind of what are contaminants. I talked to you guys earlier about like that I work on contaminants, but oftentimes, like, what do you think of when I say contaminants? And you guys like don't have to chime in here. People often think of something that is harmful or toxic, which is very true. But the interesting thing about contaminants is that they often can occur naturally in our environment, or they have occurred. So oftentimes, these contaminants that we're seeing now are something that occurred in the environment a really, really long time ago, and lives in deep, deep layers of the rock. So contaminants are primarily introduced through something called anthropogenic activities. So that's a really big, ridiculous word. Anthropogenic activities are basically mining or anything, the production of fossil fuels, any sort of like digging into really deep earth is kind of what releases these contaminants kind of into our environment, because we're not used to them. They existed so many millions of years ago that when they're introduced, they kind of shock our climate a bit. So why are they harmful? So they are harmful to people as well as animals. So I'll kind of get into that in a little bit. But some consequences from overexposure for humans kind of varies depending on contaminant types and degree of exposure. But particularly, we'll be talking about mercury a lot. And mercury can cause developmental or abnormalities for children, and neurological disorders. It can also have some pretty bad effects on adults as well. That's if you're consuming too much mercury. And luckily, a lot of the fish and things that we're eating are tested for mercury to make sure that they're safe. So all the stuff you buy in the grocery store is pretty much tested to make sure that you're consuming safe amounts of these contaminants. Another interesting thing about the word contaminants is that it refers to kind of all trace metals, which is interesting because you think of something like zinc, and zinc you need to survive. So it's cool to see that you need a certain amount of it, but excess of it can be bad for you. So harmful contaminants in fish that are harmful to humans include mercury, arsenic, cadmium, and lead. But we're going to basically just talk about mercury today. Okay, so mercury is notorious for its ability to bioaccumulate and biomagnify in marine food webs. So I kind of have a little infographic here, but can somebody tell me what bioaccumulation is? Feel like we know this. I can wait in the chat. If we're too shy, that's okay as well. I'll kind of go through and explain it. And if anyone wants to chime in, please feel free. Bioaccumulation is an increase in contaminant concentration over an organism's lifespan. So sharks are particularly vulnerable for this because they often live very long lives. So they are eating lots over their lifespan, and they can accumulate a lot of different contaminants because they are kind of living so long, which is unfortunate for them. But they also are of concern for biomagnification as well, because biomagnification is referring to the increasing of contaminant concentration throughout the food chain. So our primary producers like seagrass, that kind of stuff doesn't contain too much contaminants, but as you kind of go up from like the top down, the things that are at the very top of the food chain often have the most contaminants because they're kind of consuming everything below them. So that's another reason that sharks are of particular concern for this, because they live really long lives. So they are consuming lots of things, but they're also at a really high trophic level. So they are like of concern for biomagnification as well. So the primary route of exposure for mercury is through diet. So that's for both people and sharks. So what they're consuming is kind of can contain mercury and then in turn hurt them. Okay, so I said earlier maternal offloading, and maternal offloading is not really a well understood like notion among fish and sharks because it is a difficult thing to study. You often previously you would have to euthanize the animal in order to kind of check out what's going on with the babies and with the mom as well. But now this is one of my favorite parts of my project is looking at the maternal offloading stuff, because we actually get to ultrasound the shark, which is it's like a really interesting thing to do. You get to see all of the like kind of internal structures through the ultrasound. So here I have the visual of us. This is us monitoring a female black nose shark. And in her womb, we found 3 pups. The one that's easiest to see is the one that I have circled in red there. And it's kind of funny because it almost looks like a little angry face. So it's really interesting. The other ones are kind of turned around, so we can't really see them as well. So I highlighted that one there. So basically what we do with these females is we'll ultrasound them. If we do find pups, we'll take a muscle tissue sample and we will compare it to other females who don't have pups. So we'll compare to see maybe mom is kind of offloading some of her mercury into her pups, which could be a big issue. And oftentimes they're not, well, always, they're not meaning to do this. It's not like an intentional thing. They're not trying to poison their pups. But it's like a mode of kind of individual self-preservation. So their body just like involuntarily does it, and kind of as a way to get rid of some of the mercury that's kind of the mercury load that's floating around them, they can kind of put it into their pups. So this isn't something that's well studied in sharks at all. But it is well studied in lots of marine mammal species. So if we have any people who are like dolphin fans or whale fans here, lots of studies have been done to look at maternal offloading in those species, and it is something that's occurring, and to like a fairly great extent. So oftentimes mums will give birth and some of their offspring are not viable and not able to survive because they have such a high contaminant load. But no one's really looked at this in sharks, so I really want to kind of see if this is something that's happening, or maybe it's like a difference between kind of elasmobranchs and marine mammals. Maybe it's not occurring so much, but from the research that I've done so far and kind of the results that I have so far, I am seeing that it's occurring. So that's cool. So yeah, we'll get into why this research is important. So this is kind of why I think my research is important. So mercury is found in almost all species of fish, and it's important to monitor concentration levels to ensure that what we're eating is safe. This is something that is heavily monitored in like food fish that we eat, but lots of people do eat sharks, and there are a lot of sustainable shark fisheries. So there's not much research done on mercury in sharks to ensure that people who are consuming shark are doing so safely. So that's definitely something that I would like to put forward with my information is if you are consuming shark, we want you to do it in a safe manner. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to kind of figure out if there's certain species that are like more susceptible to like accumulating mercury and stuff like that. So monitoring concentrations in sharks can help us in further condition. So this is kind of from a shark's perspective. Mercury, I forgot to say this earlier, but it's a neurotoxin. So if they accumulate too much mercury in their system, they often have slowed growth rates. They can have some like neurological issues. So it's not good for the sharks at all. So if we find a shark that's acting funny and then we sample them and they have high mercury concentrations, then we can kind of be like, oh, maybe that might be why. But that is kind of inferring their condition is a hard thing to do because as you see here, this is one of the great hammerheads that we had tagged, and we won't see this shark again. Oftentimes where we're fishing is like nursery. It's a nursery habitat for this species specifically, but oftentimes we see the sharks once and then we never get to see them again. So we kind of can't, we only get a snapshot of their exposure throughout their life. We can't kind of keep them in a pen and keep testing them over years. That's just not what we want to do. Sharks range wide distributions all over the world. So we want to let them migrate and do their thing. And then, so in terms of the monitoring concentration levels again, so monitoring concentration levels in pregnant females and young of year pups can help us determine if maternal offloading is taking place. So it's really interesting to see if maternal offloading is taking place because that might be contributing to maybe it's a decline in population for a certain species. Or maybe we're seeing that the pups that are being kind of birthed are coming out smaller than usual and that kind of stuff. So we're able to kind of look at what the trends we're seeing in certain areas and kind of relate it back to the mercury stuff to say maybe it is mercury that's causing these pups to kind of be deficient in certain areas. So yeah, we want to give them the best shot at life. And when they come out and they already have a bunch of mercury, they're already kind of at a disadvantage, which is no good. Okay, so I'm gonna go through and I kind of talked about all my cool research that I get to do, and I'll take lots of questions at the end about my research if you guys want to chat about it. but I can sort of talk about my journey through academics. And I will be completely transparent in saying that I struggled in a traditional learning environment. I struggled throughout kind of middle school and high school. I am deaf in one ear, so I found that a lot of things that I was learning were kind of getting like lost in translation. And I also do not learn well in when someone's just like kind of talking at me. I'm a very hands-on learner. So I found it really hard in high school and I didn't have the best grades. And I tried really hard and I had a tutor in my science courses, but I still didn't have great grades. And I struggled particularly in like chemistry and physics and stuff. I always did fairly well in biology, because it was kind of where my interests were. But so I graduated high school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and no one in my family had ever been to university. So it wasn't like a whole lot of pressure for me to go to university and like pursue kind of secondary education. My parents were very happy that I did, but they were like, okay, it's like whatever you want to do. I didn't feel a lot of pressure to kind of do that. Sorry, to kind of do that. But I knew I wanted to go, and what I kind of in my head at the time, I wanted to just go for the 4 years and then be able to kind of get a job right out of it. But I learned that oftentimes that's not how university goes. And so I enrolled myself in kinesiology. And I'm still not really sure why I did that, because I was always so interested in like animals, and that was always my interest when I was a child. I was very outdoorsy. So yeah, it was really weird for me to kind of enroll myself in kinesiology, but that's what I decided to do. And I realized very quickly I did not like it at all. I liked working with people, but I really didn't like working like on people, if that makes sense. So I switched to biology. I only did a semester in kinesiology, and then I switched myself over to biology. And I feel like this is kind of a universal experience for everyone who has gone to university. I definitely still struggled in first year. My grades, again, were not the best. I was interested in what we were doing, but I found it really hard to like learn and connect with professors and things like that, because oftentimes they're just kind of talking at you, teaching you the material. And I also do not test well. So a lot of the midterms were difficult for me because I had a lot of stress around testing and stuff like that. So this is what kind of led me to enroll myself in cooperative education. So lots of universities have co-op, which is absolutely wonderful. And if anyone is kind of looking in the university direction, or even in high schools, I think they have co-op opportunities, I would 100% recommend doing it, especially if you're someone who's more of a hands-on learner. This is kind of where I started to shine, and where I started to kind of figure out what my interests were. And I stopped feeling like I wasn't like smart enough with going through school. I started feeling like I really found my place was through co-op, and the only co-op job I ever had, and I did it for 3 years afterwards, was in an aquatic ecology lab at Acadia. And I'm still in there. It's the same lab that I'm doing my master's through right now, and it's the same lab that Julia worked in, and that I met Terranaut through, which is really wonderful. So I got hired in this aquatic ecology lab at Acadia, and we got to do a whole bunch of cool stuff. And we would do like electrofishing, and we'd work with species that are freshwater, and we'd work with saltwater species, and we'd be out on boats all the time, or like walking through the woods and doing lots of sampling. So I found it a lot more interesting for me to be able to kind of do that stuff and still get university credits for it. So that was something that was really, really valuable to me. So when I was working in this lab, the professor that I was working for offered me an independent research project. So I took it, and I was very, very thrilled with the opportunity. And I have a little slide on it here. So my first kind of experience with research was working on fecundity and Atlantic tomcod. And fecundity is basically just looking at like fertility. So we would look at female eggs and count them to see how many like offspring the female could produce. So what we would do is we'd go out on the boat, we'd collect these females, we'd retain them, and then I'd do dissections and I would get the female gonad out. So that's basically just the egg pouch, which is the one in the middle here. And there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of eggs in there. So I can't count them all. So I would take a tiny known amount and put it under a microscope, which is what you see here. And then I would individually count all of the eggs. So I did this for 2 years. And it was a really cool experience to be able to count, to be able to kind of follow research through from like the beginning when you get the sample to the end where you can analyze the results and kind of look at all of the like all you can see the whole process go through, and that's really interesting. However, I did quickly realize that this was not for me. I found it really boring, honestly, and I found it lonely as well because a lot of the work that I did was just like in the lab by myself, counting the eggs and doing that stuff, which is a wonderful project. And it was a really great kind of learning curve for me to figure out what I didn't want to do, which honestly is, I would think, more valuable than knowing exactly what you want to do. Kind of figuring out what you do and don't like is really important. And I definitely learned that I didn't like doing this, which is totally okay. But yeah, there were a few things for me that were missing in my experiences so far coming through university and then going into the lab at Acadia and then doing my own research. There were still a few things for me that were like missing in my academic journey, I thought. And that was the lack of like human kind of connection with my independent research. I wanted people to be able to kind of bounce ideas off of and things to like talk about with them to kind of figure out ideas for projects and things like that. And I also missed kind of the education factor. I like working with youth. I like working with even ITA now at Acadia, and I love working with the students there who are in first year and kind of giving them some mentorship and giving them some like advice going through high school and university, because I didn't really have anyone to kind of give me advice and do that kind of stuff about where I wanted to go. And I feel like I would have had a bit more of a direct route had I had someone that I could like talk to and be like, what do I do? Because everyone has those moments. So that's kind of where Terranaut Club was introduced to me. It was in my my third year, sorry, at Acadia that I was introduced to Terranaut Club, and I have some photos of us here. And Terranaut Club kind of filled a few gaps for me in terms of like just my research experience and as well as the education aspect and the connection part. This photo in the middle, we have the most amazing team, and we're really, really fortunate to work with such lovely people. And running these programs and stuff is not easy all the time, but when you have a wonderful team to kind of like back up on, it's something that it's not even work anymore. It's just fun. And then another thing was the education aspect and also the mentorship aspect. So like kiddos would come and ask lots of questions, and I found that so fun. And like I just realized very quickly that I do really enjoy educating, and I really enjoy like kind of passing on knowledge to young ones. And then this third photo here is the science aspect. I really enjoy my research. I love it, but I kind of wanted a healthy balance between education and kind of outreach, that kind of stuff, and science. And Terranaut has kind of just filled such an important gap for me in that. And making that gap accessible is wonderful. So I always say that if I was a kiddo growing up and I had something like Terranaut, like I would have just ate it up. I would have gone to as many programs as I could have, and it would have been my favorite part of the summer. I was very outdoorsy, but I didn't really have an avenue to kind of pursue that. I would with my friends and things like that when we were younger, but I didn't have like something like Terranaut Club to kind of inspire me to go and pursue STEM careers. I probably would have went into biology right from the get-go, if so. So Terranaut has really filled kind of that gap between the science and the education that I wanted. Okay, and since working for Terranaut Club, I have graduated from Acadia and I began my master's program. So now this is my 4th summer with Terranaut, which is awesome, and I'll be here all summer running the marine biology programs, which is a lot of fun. And then I left this little trailing edge here, and this is kind of just like a little touch on future plans. I have no idea, and I feel like there's a lot of pressure put on people when they're coming out of high school and university. Like, what are you going to do? What's next? All that kind of stuff. I want to reiterate not to stress. I know that it's really hard sometimes not to stress about those types of things, but it's okay to not know what you want to do. I still have no idea. I know some things that I like, and I know some things that I don't like. And what I like is I like education, and I like outreach, and I like research. So I need to find a job that kind of encompasses that stuff for me. I don't know if that means that I'll go and pursue a PhD, or if I'd like to find a job after my master's. I really have no idea. But in the near future, I will be defending my master's thesis around this time next year. And I will be working for Terranaut and working with Terranaut for the foreseeable future. So I still don't know, but I have a little plans of things that I kind of need to get done. But other than that, we can go on to any sort of questions. I have my email there as well. And I can stop sharing my screen so that we can have a conversation and I can answer anyone's questions that they might have. Yeah, that's pretty much all for me, though.
Great. Thanks so much, Hunter.
Awesome. I can stop sharing here. I don't really, oh, there it is. Okay. Is this working?
Yeah, perfect. Um, so I had to step out for a few minutes, so I feel bad that I missed some of that, but I love that you touched on at the end there, right? Like your educational path. And Leah said in the chat, I'm also going to do some co-ops. And obviously you talked about that, which is so important. And we get questions all the time from whether it's people who are in university or college, or some of our Terranaut Club participants who are in our advanced age range, so 15 to 18, where they're always wondering, how do I work for Terranaut Club? And I will tell you that there's a few different ways, but probably the best way is to do a co-op while you are in university or college. A few different reasons. One, when you do co-op during your university or college, you get paid. So that means that you're making money while you're actually in university, which, as we all know, university and college can be really expensive. So that's just such an awesome way to get work experience, get paid for it. And then when you graduate, you have all of this really cool experience on your resume already. So, if you're applying for jobs with other people who maybe don't have that experience, maybe that's kind of the leg up. And then for Terranaut Club, so we're a nonprofit/charity, and what that usually means is that we don't have a lot of money. And so we wish we had a lot of money to pay everyone who wants to work for us, but that's just not the case. So when you come to us as a co-op student, we can actually apply for some funding from the Nova Scotia government or the Canadian government that helps us pay you. So that's one of the reasons we started doing co-op, and Hunter was our first co-op student. We're going to have another 2 this summer. So I just want to plant the seed that for anybody who's thinking about this, it doesn't have to only be through a science degree, right? Some of you might end up doing other degrees or college programs or taking time off, what have you. But yeah, so co-op is awesome. Keep that in mind. So Leah has a question from the chat. She said, how was the aquatic ecology lab? And Hunter, maybe you can also explain what aquatic and ecology mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So the aquatic ecology lab that I have worked at, it's called Team Kraken, and it's ran by a professor at Acadia who it's called Team Kraken because a kraken has a lot of different arms, and he has a lot of different arms and kind of a bunch of different research. So mostly what we would do would be with like marine fish, but we would be working with freshwater species as well. And basically, we would be monitoring these fish populations. We'd be doing tagging stuff. And then there were a whole bunch of other little projects that were mixed in with this kind of stuff. But I really did enjoy my experience there. It was just the only thing that was kind of missing for me in that sense was the like education aspect. We did some outreach and stuff where we'd go talk to like local fishermen and things like that. But we didn't really kind of get the opportunity to educate youth groups and do that kind of stuff. And that was kind of where my heart lied. So I did enjoy my time there and we got to do a lot of really cool stuff, but it wasn't totally what I wanted to do forever. And I learned that after about a year of being there. But yeah, we got to do lots of cool stuff and work with lots of different species. So yeah,
I imagine that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Hunter.
No, go right ahead.
Um, some of you are here either because you know Hunter and think she's the coolest person ever, which I would have to agree with you. But maybe you're interested in pursuing marine biology after high school. And so I know a lot of you are living in Nova Scotia. There are a few different programs around the Maritimes. And a lot of people think about that Dalhousie University in Halifax has a designated marine biology undergraduate degree. And so a lot of people think about that, which can be super fantastic if you feel like you know for sure that that's what you want to do. But Hunter and myself both went to do biology at Acadia. And so the reason I point this out is because Acadia does not have a designated marine biology program. It's just general biology. And so a benefit of doing a more general degree is, like Hunter is saying, sometimes you think you know what you want to do, and then you actually get into it and you go, oh crap, like this isn't what I wanted, or right, like in university, when you do a general biology degree, you get exposed to so many different facets and topics within biology that maybe you've never taken before. Like everybody has to take a plants and algae course in second year. And I thought I was going to hate it, and I loved it. So it's kind of interesting that sometimes when you take these general degrees, you get exposed to more things, and it kind of opens up your mind to maybe topics or fields or career paths you wouldn't have considered. And then also at Acadia, even though that there's no marine biology degree, there are professors in the department who they have research labs, like Hunter was talking about the aquatic ecology lab, where they do marine research. So just because a school doesn't have a marine biology degree doesn't mean you can't actually get involved in some of that work. Sometimes it can be tricky when you're looking at universities because university websites and college websites too are notoriously difficult to navigate. You're like, how do I find this information? Yeah. So this is a situation where we're always really happy to help. So you can, some of us are going to be at programs this summer. I'm sure Hunter, like she's saying, is really happy to help guide you. Alana also has done a lot of this kind of schooling and work. So we're always happy to help.
Another thing that I would add there was my experience at Acadia was amazing for many reasons. I don't feel like I did need a degree in particularly marine biology to kind of get where I wanted to go and do marine stuff. I hadn't known that I kind of wanted to go that way, so that's why I did general biology. But the one wonderful thing about small schools is that you often get to know your professors and things like that. So you can talk with them and you can tell them your interests, and oftentimes they're really wonderful and accommodating, and they can find you a project that kind of suits your needs. So my project now that I'm working on is in Nova Scotia and in Miami, which might be a question that pops up a little bit later, like why those two places? And honestly, it's because I had an opportunity in Miami, but I also had known the lab and the school that I'm working for here. So it was a lot more comfortable and, in all honesty, a lot cheaper to do my master's this way, which is something that I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity to do. So I have two supervisors on my master's project, and one of them is in Miami, so I get to spend like almost half the time down there with her, and then I get to spend half the time back here at Acadia, which I know and love. So it's a great avenue, and oftentimes professors and people in academia are very open and accommodating to kind of helping you achieve your goals. So, yeah.
And I know we're obviously, because a lot of us went to Acadia, we talk a lot about it a lot, and we love it a lot. But if you are interested in marine biology specific degrees, which certainly, right, almost all of your courses are going to be focused in that, which can be a great way to learn that knowledge, not the only way, but a great way. So the main marine biology programs in Canada are at, right, Dalhousie in Halifax. There's actually one at the University of Guelph in Southern Ontario, which people always laugh about because the ocean is far away. There's no near ocean, but that's okay. Still a great program. For those of you who know Sarah Brown, who was our past program coordinator, she actually did marine biology at Guelph. There's also one on the West Coast, and maybe Alana or Hunter, you know which school it is. If it's University of Victoria or UBC.
It might be Simon Fraser University, just outside of Vancouver. Not 100% sure, but it makes sense to have one on the West Coast as well.
Yeah.
And just to jump in, sorry, my voice is a little hoarse today, so if you can't hear me well, I apologize. But I also went to Dalhousie University, and for my Bachelor's of Science, I did marine biology. So I know at some point I'm going to meet some of you, and if you do have any questions about what it's like to go there, what the program was like, it has been a number of years since I graduated, but I'm always happy to help you out and put my 2 cents in.
Yeah, it's amazing to have, kind of people with us that have that experience. And then general biology degrees like Hunter and I did, you can find that degree at pretty much any university across Canada. It's a really, really common one. So there's so many universities, especially small ones across the Maritimes, that would have that. We also have a new staff member, Emmy, who's going to be one of our co-op students this summer, and she does environmental science. So that's kind of another different path to take to learn about some of these things. So I'm sure Emmy would be happy to answer questions about that type of degree. And of course, we often talk about university, but college is also a really fantastic route to take. It's a lot more hands-on learning instead of kind of classroom textbook based. Some people take gap years or they work for a few years before they decide what they want to do. Like there's no wrong answer. And I know, like Hunter was saying, a lot of people tend to feel pressured, right, coming out of high school to know exactly what you want to do. But the reality is that I think almost everybody doesn't know. They want to figure it out, but so question for you, Hunter, was how was the kinesiology program? Because Leah got a glimpse of it when she got a tour of Acadia.
Yeah, I know that the kinesiology at Acadia is like quite renowned in Canada. It's a really great program. And kinesiology isn't offered at a whole lot of universities. So Acadia is kind of like a little hub for it. I liked the program. It was very hands-on. I just learned very quickly that I liked working with people and I liked the aspect of like doing group work together and doing all that kind of stuff, but I didn't like the anatomy stuff. I didn't enjoy, and I didn't like actually working on people, if that makes sense. Like I thought I wanted to be a physiotherapist, and then I realized like I don't want to have to move people around all day and do that kind of stuff. That wasn't really where my interest lied, which is totally fine. I just don't think I knew what I was kind of signing myself up for at that point. But I do have friends who have gone through the kinesiology program and absolutely adored it. So it all depends on your kind of personal preferences, and I wouldn't shy away from it if it is something that you're interested in. And also there's like no shame in switching degrees if you need to. I switched my degree. Almost all of my friends, I had a friend in biology with me and she was like, this is not for me. And she went into business. And I was like, good for you. It's like completely opposite things, but there's no shame in that either. And in your first like kind of year or two, you have a lot of freedom. So you're able to kind of switch the direction that you want to go. So there's really no harm in trying.
I started off in medical radiation sciences at McMaster University in Hamilton because I thought I wanted to be a radiation therapist who is a medical professional that helps administer radiation therapy or like cancer treatment. And I did a year of that and I hated it and it sucked. And I was at a big school and I thought, oh no, no, this is not what I wanted. And then I transferred. So I have a few more questions in mind, but I did want to ask Alana. So because you did your marine biology degree at Acadia, can you tell us about some of the cool, like different courses that you got to take, or maybe what some of your favorites were?
For sure. It was at Dalhousie University.
Oh, yes, sorry.
And I also did my degree partly at King's College, which is right beside Dalhousie. It's a liberal arts university. I did the foundation year program there. So in first year, they focus a lot on philosophy. And you start basically at the base with the Epic of Gilgamesh, so something really, really old, and you work your way throughout history to modern times. And I was there because I wanted the small university feel, but I also knew that I wanted a bigger university to then do my science degree in. So it was kind of best of both worlds in that sense. But after first year, I did transition more into Dalhousie, and most of my courses from there were at Dal. That being said, though, one of my favorite classes was back at King's, and it was a history of science and technology, all about boat building and different ways of navigation that we use throughout history. And I always thought the history aspect of things when it comes to the ocean was really, really interesting and very different than what I was learning in my biology oriented degree. But at Dalhousie, I think it's the proximity in general of universities in Nova Scotia to the ocean that makes it really special to study a program like that. We didn't often go to the ocean during the school year, but sometimes the ocean was brought to us in that we would have samples brought to us from the Halifax Harbor or elsewhere that we could then study in university in the laboratory. I also really liked the summer programs at Dal. They're called Seaside courses, and they actually have a shark tagging course that leaves out of Fisherman's Cove just in Dartmouth on the other side of Halifax. And they go out and study blue sharks every year. They talk about how you tag and what kind of resources and what kind of information can be gained from tagging and tracking these sharks. So seaside courses are for sure something that's really interesting to look into. And kind of similar to you, Julia, I also really enjoyed the plants and algae course I took. It was so fun to learn because I love plants on land, but I didn't really know a lot about plants in the water until taking this course and becoming more familiar with them. I remember one day in that class, we went and collected samples of seaweed, and then we created these presses, and it became almost like a beautiful art installation and science tied in one. And I just thought that was so beautiful to bridge kind of multidisciplinary aspects of learning into a project.
Very cool. And Alana is currently programming. We have an upcoming field trip for a junior age range that's going to be plants and pollinators. The blue shark tagging that Alana mentioned. So we're going to be trying to incorporate that into our advanced marine biology shark conservation program this summer. So we're in the process of booking that. Hunter's going to be leading that program. We're really excited. We've never done shark tagging in Nova Scotia. We've done a few programs with that down in Miami. So we've got a few minutes left, and I did want to ask you, Hunter, especially related to some of the field work that you've had a chance to do, which is really cool stuff. Can you tell us about a time that you kind of got pushed outside of your comfort zone and maybe you like weren't sure or weren't really confident and just how that worked for you?
Yeah, I think that going into my kind of co-op, I had a fair amount of experience on boats and things like that, just because my uncle is a lobster fisherman. So we had spent some time out on boats and doing that kind of stuff, but I hadn't really had experience with the actual like science behind it. We would spend time on the water, but if we were catching fish and stuff, we were rod and reel fishing. And the scientific kind of research that we do is using kind of the most efficient way to catch these fish. So we would learn how to use large nets and things like that to kind of bring them in, or big traps. And that was definitely something that was outside of my comfort zone. I think I dealt with it fairly well. But when the fish come on to the boat, it's a very quick and kind of fast and dirty to get them measured and tagged and thrown back in the water. They obviously cannot breathe on land, so we don't want to be fiddling around and like taking our time. So we would be as kind of quick and precise as we could with that kind of stuff. I think the number one thing that when I look back at my experience in my aquatic ecology lab, my number one thing that kind of pushed me outside of my comfort zone, and that was honestly very hard for me to kind of deal with, was my research that I had done with the tom cod. It is lethal researching, so you have to kind of bring the fish back home, back to Acadia with you to dissect them and do that kind of stuff. So sometimes in science there is some kind of lethal sampling, and this was really, really difficult for me. In all honesty, I had a really hard time with it, because I am like such an animal lover to my core that it was really hard for me to kind of have to euthanize fish and that kind of stuff. So that was something that I learned very quickly that I am not comfortable with. So I now, doing my master's project, I have kind of switched the focus to doing non-lethal sampling, so that we are not taking the animal out of the environment. And that's definitely something that I had to come to terms with. And I didn't really realize before, when I started doing this, I didn't realize that that would be something I had to deal with. It was never a thought in my brain. And then I was like, oh. So yeah, lots of science is changing constantly, and lots of scientific efforts now are towards not taking the animal out of the environment when you're sampling them, which is absolutely wonderful. Like when they used to do diet studies and things, they'd want to see what's in their bellies, so you would have to retain the animal. And now we have ways of like making sharks throw up and like doing things like that, so that we can get the kind of study and research that we're looking for, but without kind of harming the animal, which is really cool. So yeah, that would be kind of that was my big learning curve for sure.
And that's so important when, so much of this research is focused on conservation, right? So we don't want to be killing animals when we're trying to help conserve their populations. And a lot of the species that Hunter has a chance to work with, or some of them, I should say, are maybe threatened or endangered species. So you can imagine that there are endangered species that the government has set up really intense kind of laws and regulations to protect them, right? And so that means that as a researcher, you have to work within these regulations. So you can still, right, collect the little bit of muscle tissue that Hunter needs, but you're making sure that you're releasing those animals back into the water as soon as possible, or you're monitoring them really, really carefully. So, sometimes when you kind of get an animal that is a threatened or endangered species and you're trying to collect information from them, the top priority is making sure that the animal is safe and in good condition. So sometimes let's say, oh, I really need to get a great hammerhead shark. Like I don't have enough samples from them, and you finally get one, but it's coming to the boat and it's not looking like it's in really good condition. You have to make a decision in that moment where, you know what, the health of this animal is more important than that little piece of tissue that I need. So maybe we're going to cut the line, or we're really quickly going to remove the hook and just release that animal back into the water. And sometimes that can be difficult when you really need that sample, or you're so excited to see that species, right? Maybe it's the first time you've ever seen it. You really want a photo with it. You really want to have this experience. But as conservationists, right, the ultimate goal is trying to help these populations. So I'm sure that we all have, who have done research, kind of had to make those decisions and think about that. So I'm going to give another minute here for anyone to ask a final question. And I did actually, Alana, I'm wondering if you can really quickly talk about the great white shark TV production that you were a part of, because it's so relevant for the shark stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, that was a super fun project that I was part of over the last 2 years. Because of my background in scuba diving, I'm a scuba diving instructor in Halifax at a local shop called Torpedo Rays. We have been seeing a lot and hearing stories, a lot of more great white sharks coming about our waters here. A few divers now have even had encounters with great white sharks. So for me, it was both a learning opportunity, but also just a way to dive deeper, to share the story of great white sharks in Nova Scotia. So this production is called Jossum. Canada's Great White Sharks, or Atlantic Canada's Great White Sharks, and it's available on CBC The Nature of Things. You can stream it live for free, or not live, but for free on CBC Gem. And it's an hour-long program, and we talk about the history of great white sharks in Atlantic Canada, some reasons why we're seeing them maybe now, and it seems like they're kind of coming back. Some people thought that they're coming here for the first time, but we do have an Indigenous perspective in the storyline as well that dives into the fact that great white sharks have always been around. And it's just that we now need to relearn to relive with them, because it's something we have dealt with in the past and we are starting to realize we're going to have to deal with again in the future. I'm super excited to dive in Nova Scotia and hopefully see my first great white shark on scuba. And it was just a really fun program to be part of.
That's awesome.
Well, maybe, Alana, if you can put the name of that in the chat for anybody who wants to look it up.
For sure.
And then before we go, I did want to mention that. So some of you who are returning participants and you are applying to attend another summer program, you might know that you have to complete an Earn Your Way Back activity. So if you go on our website, there's a full long list of different things that you can do. You can also come up with your own idea and just email myself or Alana, and we can always let you know if that kind of counts as your activity. But just so you know, attending Hunter's talk today does count as your activity. So all you have to do now, if this is what you want to do for your Earn Your Way Back, is go on the Earn Your Way Back website page, and at the bottom of it, there's a short little report. So you just have to fill out a really quick report. Shouldn't take you longer than 15 minutes about kind of what you learned from Hunter today. And I know that there's so many more questions for Hunter, but like she mentioned, she's going to be working for us this summer. So hold on to those questions. And Hunter is so happy to share and teach. So Leah says, thank you for the great presentation. Yes, thank you so much, Hunter, for coming and sharing. It's been a long time coming of wanting to have you chat with everybody. So we are going to post this onto YouTube. So if anybody wants to watch it again, you are absolutely able to do so. Garcia says, thank you. Ayla says, thanks so much. So thank you, everybody, for attending. We hope you have a wonderful Sunday. And if any questions come up about summer programs or Hunter or Earn Your Way Back, feel free to shoot us an email.
And thank you guys very much for listening. I know sometimes I can ramble on a bit, but I'm really happy that you guys enjoyed it. And I can put my email. It's at the end of the recording now, but I can put it in the chat. And you guys can send me an email if you have any more questions and maybe you didn't get to ask it here, then I can answer some.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to ask Hunter and Alana to hang on for a few minutes. And otherwise, everybody, thanks so much for joining. Happy weekend. And we hope to see you either at our spring programs or our summer programs, or maybe online sometime soon. So have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.